buckling down for 4 more months of winter, doing a Chick-fil-A commercial, opening up a box of See's candies, only instead of it being filled with delightful nuts and chews, it's filled with bees. These are just a few of the things I would rather do than devote more time and brain space to thinking about Steve Bannon. Why won't he go away? As much as I wish he would return to Mordor and leave us alone, I will allow that it's important to understand a man who wields such influence in the global halls of power. The new documentary, The Brink, gives us a glimpse into the mind of the would-be puppet master of populist leaders worldwide. To tell us more about the film, we're joined by its director, Alison Klayman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh my God, best intro ever. Thank you.
That was funny.
And we also have the producer, Marie Therese Gurgis. Welcome to 112BK.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this documentary is a verite doc. Alison, you are following around Steve Bannon. There's no talking heads. You're just recording what you see. And my immediate question is, how did he allow you to do this? How did you get access?
This is where it's great that you have both of us here because the story definitely starts with Marie Therese.
All right, over to you to Marie Therese.
I knew him. I worked for him many years ago. I was working at an art house film company that he bought. He didn't buy it with his own money, but he got the money and bought it, and he became my boss. So he was my boss for 3 years.
That's right. He was a film executive.
Yeah, I mean, he was an investment banker in the entertainment space.
Right.
He had various roles in Hollywood.
I also learned that he was in charge of Biodome 2.
Yeah, he was for a year.
There was no occasion to use that tape, but it's on YouTube. You can watch it.
Wow.
It's a little interview about it.
I will be looking that up. I also am looking forward to a reboot of Biodome starring Pauly Shore. Maybe Stephen Baldwin as Steve Bannon. So you had an existing relationship with him.
Yeah, I had an existing relationship with him. And I was, watching him become this sort of larger-than-life public figure and covered every place. And it was increasingly, honestly, driving me crazy to see not only what he was doing, which I was really disturbed by, and I told him, I reached out to him and wrote to him and texted him a number of occasions, basically telling him I was disgusted and furious at what he was doing. But then I started to get, honestly, a little bit frustrated with what the media was doing and how he was being both, just given so much constant attention, but the kind of attention. He was really built up as this, mastermind, evil genius, Darth Vader, Death himself on Saturday Night Live. And if you think about it, while those are negative, they're incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. And I knew him really well. I had been fairly close to him years ago. I had been in touch with him on and off, although not in the years directly preceding this. And I just felt that, he was being built up, and all of this seemingly negative attention was actually fueling him and allowing him to, go on speaking tours and give speeches and then eventually to go to Europe. And I really wanted to try to kind of dispel some of that. And I felt that the only way to really do that was through documentary. And I produced documentaries. And so one day, after many months of despair and telling him off, I just asked him. And he said no. He said, "You'll destroy me." That was his response. Because he knew how I felt. I made it really clear what he was
still in the White House.
He was still in the White House. Mm-hmm. I asked him a few more times, and each time he would say no, or he would ignore my emails. And then the last time he wrote back and said, he was still in the White House, by the way. He wrote back and said, "I'll do it." And that came as, as a half surprise. I think I kept asking because I knew that if I asked often enough, he would do it. But it was still sort of like, oh no, now I got to do this. Now I got to, spend a year with him. And that really was the beginning of it.
Alison, what was your initial reaction? I mean, your previous documentary, you spent a bunch of time with Ai Weiwei, and now Steve Bannon is sort of a different figure. Were you at all reluctant to spend this much time with him?
So I was kind of down for the project. I did say yes automatically, which I then later sort of examined. Why was that so automatic? But with the caveat of, I don't know anything about what he's like as a person. I mean, obviously, I have my own political vantage point on the world. I didn't think that was, I wasn't entering into this to be like, let me see if my politics are going to be challenged by what he's doing per se. I really did think it was an opportunity to kind of go into enemy territory to really see what's happening and let them expose their tactics, really especially with Bannon, how he works, who he's working with. And, he walked in the room and honestly, it was the first 10 seconds of him talking. I was just like, wow, this guy actually has charisma and he's going to say some shit. It felt like you could tell that he was going to reveal himself in ways that he probably wouldn't realize he was doing. I know that seems crazy, but, you know, when you do this also for a living and, you know, you watch people and you can see, like, is there going to be a lot here? And it definitely felt like there was going to be a lot there.
And I think that's a great segue into our first clip, which we'll play in a moment, where he really does reveal some of his character.
Yep.
How many absolute votes have already been cast? Is like 3.9 million?
The aggregate national.
Not national, not national, Pat.
Million.
Pat, I'm talking about Florida. Please stay focused.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just stay focused, okay? I want to fucking go through these states. I don't give a fuck about a national number. Go back to Florida. How many votes have been? Will you shut the fuck up and let the guy talk?
Okay. So far, 41.7% of Republicans.
And for our viewers who are listening on the podcast rather than watching, that last sound is him banging his head against like an IKEA cabinet. I think he comes across as charming when he needs to be charming. I think he also comes across as very angry. The way that he speaks to people who work for him is not the way that I would want a manager to speak to me. I think he thinks that he's the smartest man in the room.
Well, in that room, he might be. I mean,
It's a low bar.
to be honest, the bar was not very high in that room.
I mean, you know, one question that I am left with is what makes him tick. So we talked a little bit about his background. You know, he went to Virginia Tech. He was in the armed services. He went to Harvard Business School. He was a Goldman Sachs guy. He seems to have no skin in the populist game. Like, he's not an everyman. He wants to tell you that he went to Harvard. And so why does he want what he wants, and why won't he just leave us alone?
I mean, you're totally hitting on exactly the right questions. I mean, I think that there's something fairly kind of empty about the ideology that he professes to have. I think that when you get down, you can kind of trace it down to a few core ideas that I do think influence his worldview, and they ultimately come down to preserving a white Christian America and Europe, and, you know, a lot of his solutions for what he is now framing as an economic issue and that it's about the little guy, you know, the solutions that he offers are all related to controlling the movement of people, you know, and having walls and immigration policy and fretting about the birth rates of, you know, Muslim migrants to Europe. But a lot of that is mixed into his own vanity, his desire for power, his ability to enrich himself and to see himself as a figure of historical import.
And I think you capture the vanity really well. Like, these moments come across where there's almost like a subplot where he's trying to lose weight and he hates how he looks on camera. And he does take it personally when people, you know, compare him to Jabba the Hutt.
He's vain, you know. He's in that sense, he's like anyone else. He can sort of laugh off these things. I don't think he does, but I think he does absolutely care. He was a handsome young man, you know. I like to say that I think his exterior reflects what he's been doing for the past, 10, 15 years.
It's not you are what you eat. It's you
That's
are
really,
your political ideology.
It's actually what I really
all the
believe.
kombucha
Because,
is not gonna help
when I knew him well, which was like 15 years ago, I mean, if you saw pictures of him back then, he is aged far more than chronological years would normally age somebody. But I think that he thinks, or at least he would say, that he's sort of sacrificing. This is all a sacrifice, right? This is all a sacrifice for the country. So him sort of even giving up his health, giving up sleep, giving up, eating well, socializing, having a private life. He's sacrificing for the country. Now, I tend to look at that as a load of shit, honestly, but that's what he would say.
Yeah.
But it's also not just the country, because most of this film charts him flying across Europe, private, I should mention, trying to rally populist leaders, the worst of the worst, into some sort of like unified movement, right? So what is the thing? Like, what is he sacrificing for? Is it, as you said, like white nationalism?
Well, I think it's also kind of, for better or worse, that's like what his brand is. Like that, this is where he has clout and he has people who want to, take meetings with him. Ever since he's been doing Breitbart, this is kind of his brand, and he's nothing if not a messenger and a propagandist, a self-described propagandist. I think that there's something to this vision that we kind of have to give him. I don't want to say give him credit for, but in terms of like when people say, why make a movie about him now? Because a lot of the movie is kind of rendering him as one journalist said to me, you made him seem smaller than life. And I think it is also kind of, demystifying him, deconstructing him, knocking him down a little bit, and poking holes through what makes him, the idea that he's so powerful. But this articulation of a seemingly completely contradictory idea of a global, international, unified far right is in some ways kind of a new idea. He didn't totally invent it, but he is becoming this very big proponent of it. And he's putting in the work at the, on the tab of whatever billionaires are funding all these flights and all these trips. But he is trying to bring people together who maybe thought they had something in common, but never necessarily sat down at the table.
And that's a great segue into another clip that we'll play. This is Bannon talking to the former leader of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage, about sort of assembling a legion of doom across Europe and the world.
If you're interested, what I'd like to do is set up something, and I'll fund it somehow, that I think you're the perfect guy. We help knit together this populist nationalist movement throughout the world. Because guys in Egypt are coming to me, the Modi's guys in India, Duterte, and we get Orban and even thing, and we're somehow some sort of convening authority for conferences and stuff like that, so we can get ideas out there. I mean, do you think that's a worthwhile thing?
Yeah,
or you think
I know.
nobody's got it. Nobody's doing it right now.
It's not being done.
He's putting this idea out there that, Bolsonaro is great and that he's with Bolsonaro, and then Bolsonaro shows up at the White House. I mean, I think that there's something, it's like kind of with this movie as a balancing act, and while on the one hand wanting to put his influence into perspective, I also think it would be wrong to say, like, it's all a mirage.
Yeah, and I would actually say that in Europe, in some ways, the threat is greater because it's very real. There's an election happening in May. And I think what you'll end up seeing is that the far right will win a number of seats. People have known this, now for quite a while. The far right is obviously rising in many European countries, and he'll take the credit, and then that will fuel him to then go to Asia, to the Middle East, to Latin America.
The problem is they have no bottom, and they're just willing to use any kind of messaging, even if it's filled with lies about migrants, about, Islam, but the worldview, they're willing to pull from all of the stuff, frankly, that's in the manifesto of the New Zealand shooter. I mean, it's the same stuff about conquering and fearing, a change in the culture of Europe. What's scary is the tactics are either amoral or actually illegal, but they're doing it through a mechanism right now that's just electoral politics. And, if they can get more people out to vote for, what they're offering, which again, I maintain is not really any solutions for people. It's really just based on hate and fear. Yeah. But they could be successful. And, all of that is the kind of stuff that I felt like that's what I was in it for, not just to to hang out with Bannon or to understand what makes him tick.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah, it really was to understand what is moving all this. And I feel like that is what it comes down to.
Alison, you mentioned that one of your goals with this film was to make him smaller than life. And you were filming during the time period that Errol Morris's documentary American Dharma was released in Venice. And Morris was roundly criticized as letting him off the hook and giving him a bully pulpit. And this is something that Bannon says also in your film, where he's like, mainstream media is our best friend. And you sort of track him on this grand tour of Europe with headlines from Der Spiegel and Le Monde and The Guardian, following him wherever he goes, giving legitimacy, even if they're being critical of him, giving legitimacy to these ideas. So was that at all in your thinking as a filmmaker as you were following him? And did the reception of the Errol Morris documentary influence at all how you decided to tell this story?
Well, our project started months before that one. So, from the beginning, neither the premise nor the execution was really influenced by the fact that Errol Morris came in and filmed a very different film with Bannon. It obviously impacted us in ways that related more to like a business aspect.
Yeah.
He's a legendary filmmaker, in my field. It definitely feels a little bit like David and Goliath. So it certainly affected our production. I wouldn't say it impacted the approach in any way. I think we had already seen that, I had already seen that his relationship to the media had to be part of the story.
Yeah, and I think that, from the beginning, we talked about the fact that the film had to be verite for a reason. And I think, with all due respect to Errol Morris, I mean, he makes these interview films, and I think often they're very successful. I think that Bannon is a very specific figure. He's very difficult to interview because I think he comes to an interview as a battle. He actually gets sort of, hypes himself up for them and really looks at them like a cage match in a way. And I'm personally, my feeling going into it was that I don't know, even someone as, brilliant as Errol Morris, I don't know how much you're going to gain from interviewing Steve Bannon. I don't know what is going to actually be truly illuminating. I think, his intentions were very much to challenge him, and I think he does in the film, but I think it becomes just strictly about Bannon. And to me, personally, I think that's a mistake because I don't think Bannon is the cause of everything, just the way I don't think Trump is the cause of everything. I think Bannon is as much of a symptom as he is a cause, and so is Trump. And to sort of focus strictly on Bannon by virtue of filming him for 3 days in an interview, to me, is kind of gives him, again, a little bit too much power, if even though I don't believe that was his intention.
And I haven't seen American Dharma, but, I think you're right that the format of Errol Morris documentaries set him up for failure. Like, he brought in Terratron to a gunfight. And, Bannon is a skilled debater.
Yeah.
And I think that it was actually very important in your film that your voice didn't appear that often. You sort of let him speak for himself. And actually, one of the times when your voice does appear, I think it revealed a lot about his personality. And I take it that you speak Mandarin.
Yeah.
You correct his pronunciation of a name. And can you tell me what happens in this scene?
Yeah, I mean, I correct his mispronunciation of a Communist Party leader named Wang Qishan, and who he calls Wang Qishan. And just in that moment, it felt like something, I frankly didn't want to, I always would joke with him, I don't want to help you, but you're saying this wrong. And he's just really, he's playful, but actually resistant. He's quite stubborn to take the note. Yeah,
he's so pissed.
And it's sort of and it's also kind of questioning me. And again, it comes off playful, but it goes on too long. You know what I mean? It's questioning me and, saying, oh, I'm not talking about people in China. You know what I mean? It's just so ludicrous. And because it is this private moment. And I was looking for, the film is not constructed to be that it's not about my time with Bannon in the sense of do I get my licks in and do I make him, do we spar and I nail him? That's just not the way the film is framed. But I do, and for me, it was always preferable for someone to challenge him in front of the camera. Better, even if I might get points in my footage, it's better if someone else does it. It's not about him and the voice, the disembodied voice off camera, right?
And there is one scene where he is challenged by a Guardian journalist.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that scene.
So that is a journalist by the name of Paul Lewis, who was there also doing a sort of more extended video documentary for the Guardian, and he really came prepared. He had his own camera, so he was doing it, a bit in that kind of style. It's not just a print journalism where you're observing or doing a written interview. He was there to spar, but frankly, he wins because he came prepared and he can show, that exchange really exposes the way that Bannon deals with direct challenges when he's caught, which is to lie, to change the topic, to just deny the facts of the situation completely.
Yeah, and maybe this is a question for you, Marie Therese, as somebody who knows him. In that scene, Paul Lewis says he's talking about some of Bannon's anti-Semitic dog whistle or just whistle tactics. And he says, you know that when you say George Soros is funding this global agenda, that is anti-Semitic. And Bannon repeatedly says, no, it's not. He says, I can't believe that you, Paul, would think that is a dog whistle tactic. And Paul responds and is I know that you know that's true. You're a smart man. And I guess my question is is he definitely is using rhetoric that is racist. Is he himself racist? Does he believe in the supremacy of the white race?
So we get asked this a lot. I was asked this for many months before we even started making a documentary. At the end of the day, the conclusion that I had to reach, and I believe, is that it doesn't really matter. I can't tell you exactly. I have my own sort of personal feelings about it, which are complicated, but it doesn't matter because when you look at what he does, when you look at who he does it with, when you look at what he is sparking and continues to spark in this country and around the world, those things are all racist. Those things are all anti-Semitic. Those things are all, white nationalist. And so while, we could have another hour-long discussion about his personal psychology and what he really believes or doesn't really believe, I think it doesn't matter. And in some ways, the conclusion I would come to is that no matter how you look at it, it's terrible. Because whether he actually wakes up every day and actually thinks really terrible thoughts about people who are not white, that's really bad. If he doesn't and he still does what he's doing, you could argue in some ways that that's even worse. So either way, it's, you reach the same conclusion. And I actually think that as a country, my opinion is that we have to kind of stop focusing on the personal sort of ideology and stop even thinking of racism as just the people in Charlottesville. Those are the obvious racists, right? Those are the people that really wear it on their sleeves. But there are people who do and support and champion policies that harm people of other races and religious minorities who might not be the people who are in the streets screaming horrible things or physically harming people. And I think we see that in our government. I think the entire my personal opinion is the entire Republican Party is racist. The entire Republican Party in 2019 is anti-Semitic, is a white nationalist party. And Bannon is the Republican Party. You cannot separate those.
I think that's such an important point because I came away from this documentary thinking, well, is he an opportunist? Or, what's in his heart of hearts? Is he actually a racist? And actually, who fucking cares?
That's what it's great that we have this opportunity to, where people are asking what we think, because that's definitely our message. I think the movie can lead you there and speak for itself, but if you ask us, that's definitely, it's not about what's in his heart, and the movie leads you instead to this question. Right?
Well, maybe I'll close out with one more policy question, I guess. So Bannon says to this Guardian journalist, I'm talking to you because you have an audience that I want to reach. I need to convert 20% of your guys. And then he's in conversation with John Thornton, who's the ex-head of Goldman Sachs again. And Thornton is saying that, they need to have a way of reaching the blacks, the Hispanics. And I'm like, on what fucking planet? Like, what are they talking about? Who are these 20% of progressives or some of the blacks and the Hispanics who they think they're going to appeal to with the racist platform? What is that about?
Well, I think that this, whole year that I was watching them is definitely them trying to frame their message or maybe put this veneer around it that makes it more about economics. It's all a rebranding and it's an obfuscation. It is something that worries me. The fact that he says it a lot in the film is there because he says it even more in real life. I'm trying to communicate through this edit, that this is something that really matters to him and I think that's why he's saying it's not about racism and all that stuff. But as we're saying, it's not that we buy that, but we're saying you have to look at what the policies are underneath, and then you can see what it's all really about.
I don't necessarily think the risk is actually the African American and Latino population turning towards Bannon or Trump. I think it's white people, honestly. So I think although he says we're going to convert, I think who he's looking to convert are white people, and in a very calculated manner. He believes that they can get some, let's say, former Bernie supporters. While I'd like to say that's impossible, I don't know if it's impossible.
I think it would only be possible through people believing the fake message that he's putting out there, because I think right now his supporters are largely just white people, and they're also people of all kinds of economic backgrounds. And I think when you look at the film and you see who's funding his movement, it's billionaires, right? It's not it's not about getting big money out of politics. It's actually leaning even more into the dark money, kind of shadier part of things. So people would have to be being fooled because he is not acting in their interest. No matter what your race or your economic, situation, it's very clear that he's carrying water for billionaires and for corporate interests.
Well, tell us a little bit about the film and where and when people can see it.
So Magnolia Pictures is releasing the film. It's called The Brink. It's going to be opening this Friday, March 29th. In the city, it'll be at IFC Center and at the landmark 57th Street. And I'll be doing Q&As all weekend.
Yeah, and it's also opening this weekend for anyone listening. It's opening or watching. It's opening in Boston and Los Angeles this weekend.
DC and Los Angeles.
Sorry, DC and Los Angeles. And then over the next 6 or 7 weeks, it's opening in 50+ cities and towns. So hopefully everyone will get a chance to see it.
And wouldn't it be great to have, a healthy box office report for Bannon to see when he opens his, news on Monday? I think that would be great.
The film is called The Brink. Everyone go see it with your friends, yell at the screen, get good and angry. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show, Alison, Marie Therese.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.